At first glance, the world of a deeply intuitive and empathetic soul appears to be a sanctuary of peace. You might know someone like this in your life, perhaps a friend, a partner, or a colleague who seems to possess an almost magical sense of calm. They are the gentle listeners, the ones who offer a warm smile and a safe space when the world outside feels too loud. They seem to navigate the chaos of modern life with a quiet grace, avoiding drama and seeking only harmony. But as you spend more time in their presence, you begin to notice a subtle shift in the atmosphere. The conversations that once felt light and casual suddenly carry a profound, almost overwhelming depth. You might find yourself feeling as though your very soul is being carefully examined rather than simply being spoken to. Their reactions, which you assumed would be predictable and simple, become complex and deeply layered. It is in these moments of friction that you realize a startling truth. Being intimately close to someone with such a profound psychological architecture can occasionally feel entirely maddening. They do not set out to confuse you, nor do they harbor any manipulative intentions. In fact, their greatest desire is usually just to cultivate profound peace and genuine connection. However, because their minds operate on a completely different frequency, blending sharp intuition with overwhelming emotional awareness and relentless internal reflection, they often end up leaving the people they love the most feeling entirely bewildered. To understand this dynamic, we must look deeply into the way their inner universe is constructed. Their minds are not simple mirrors reflecting the world exactly as it is. Instead, their minds are more like vast, hidden libraries where every single thought, feeling, and unspoken gesture is cataloged, analyzed, and stored. Because their internal world runs on such a completely different operating system compared to the fast-paced, surface-level way modern society functions, inevitable misunderstandings arise. Imagine the bustling streets of Seoul or London, where everyone is rushing forward, fueled by the relentless pressure to succeed and the rapid pace of daily survival. In the midst of this overwhelming rush, the deeply intuitive person is standing still, feeling the emotional currents of every single person who walks past. You could be having what you think is a perfectly casual conversation over dinner, but they have already picked up on a slight hesitation in your voice that you did not even know you had. You might assume everything is perfectly fine between the two of you, only to discover much later that they have been quietly carrying the heavy burden of a misunderstood comment for days, without ever uttering a single word of complaint. It is never a personal attack against you. It is simply the reality of a complex soul moving through a world that is often too loud, too fast, and too harsh for their delicate internal wiring. While the rest of the world moves quickly past a momentary interaction, these souls will carry that single moment with them, turning it over and over in their minds like a precious stone. This deeply ingrained habit can drive their loved ones to the brink of frustration. You may start to feel as though you are constantly walking on eggshells, completely unsure of how your words will be interpreted. It can feel as though nothing is ever allowed to just be simple. Every casual word is treated as though it has a profound hidden layer, even when you are genuinely just trying to make small talk. Because these individuals are usually highly polite and deeply adverse to causing conflict, they will rarely voice their analytical concerns in the moment. Instead, they allow these heavy thoughts to pile up internally until the weight becomes so immense that they become visibly overwhelmed or suddenly distant. By the time this happens, you are left completely in the dark, wondering what on earth went wrong, because in your reality, nothing significant happened at all. It feels like being placed under a high-powered emotional microscope when all you wanted was to share a cup of coffee and a laugh. The poignant irony here is that they do this purely out of love. They analyze you because they desperately want to understand the deepest, truest version of who you are. But in their pursuit of profound connection, they often create a tension that feels heavy and exhausting. The second pattern that causes profound confusion is their incredibly inconsistent emotional expression. Being close to them can sometimes feel like standing in the middle of changing seasons. One day, they are fully present, radiating warmth, engaging in the most beautiful and deeply vulnerable conversations you have ever experienced. They are emotionally available, full of brilliant insights, and make you feel like you are the only person in the universe. But the very next day, they might be entirely quiet, emotionally distant, and completely unreadable. To the people who love them, this sudden shift feels like being violently yanked between a warm embrace and an impenetrable wall of mystery, and it is undeniably exhausting. This behavior is almost never a manipulative tactic or a sign of simple moodiness. Rather, it is the result of massive emotional overload. When they feel completely safe, grounded, and energetically balanced, they open their hearts fully. But the moment something feels out of alignment, whether they are physically exhausted, emotionally drained from absorbing the pain of others, or sensing some unspoken tension in the environment, their immediate survival instinct is to retreat deep into their inner fortress. To the outside observer, this sudden quietness feels incredibly confusing and sometimes even deeply hurtful. You naturally assume that because the connection was so vibrant yesterday, it should be exactly the same today. When you try to reach out and find them unresponsive, human nature leads you to assume that you must have done something terribly wrong. That heavy silence creates a vast emotional distance that is profoundly difficult to navigate, especially for people who value steady, predictable, and open communication. The underlying tragedy is that these deeply sensitive souls are often completely unaware of how much their sudden withdrawal terrifies the people around them. In their mind, stepping back to process a heavy emotion or an energetic imbalance is a completely harmless and necessary act of self-preservation. They might be quietly nursing a past hurt, thinking through a complex global problem, or trying to understand a sudden shift in your energy. But instead of vocalizing this process, they turn invisible. This unpredictability creates a profound sense of emotional instability for their partners and friends. You begin to question everything. Are they angry? Are they planning to leave? And when you finally gather the courage to ask them what is wrong, they will often offer a gentle smile and say that they are perfectly fine, even when their soul is crying out for rest. Over time, the relentless push and pull of this emotional tide can wear down even the most patient and loving companions. This leads us directly to the third frustrating reality, which is their tendency to completely withdraw from the world without offering a single word of explanation. One of the most painful experiences for anyone in a relationship with such a person is witnessing them suddenly pull away emotionally, mentally, and physically. Messages go unread. Joyful plans are abruptly canceled. A person who was your closest confidant suddenly feels like a polite stranger. This silent disappearance drives people absolutely mad, not out of malice, but out of a desperate lack of understanding. These individuals very rarely announce that they need space. They do not send a warning signal. They simply fade into the background. The psychological reason behind this vanishing act is tied to their extraordinary capacity for empathy. They move through life absorbing the emotional energy of every room they enter. They carry the heavy stories, the unspoken traumas, and the hidden grief of everyone they meet. Much like the older generations who silently bore the incredible hardships of war and poverty to rebuild a broken nation into a shining miracle, these sensitive souls bear the emotional weight of their communities in absolute silence. But every human vessel has a limit. When they become entirely saturated with the emotions of others, they must seek absolute solitude to empty their minds and reclaim their own identity. The great tragic flaw in this process is their assumption that the people around them naturally understand this need for isolation. They naively believe that their exhaustion is visible to the naked eye. To their friends and family, however, this unannounced departure feels exactly like a harsh rejection. It creates an agonizing lack of clarity. Those who care deeply for them are left alone in the dark, agonizing over what mistake they might have made to cause such a sudden freezing of affection. But the pure, unvarnished truth is that this retreat has absolutely nothing to do with you. It is a desperate, necessary pilgrimage back to their own center. They are simply trying to clear the static from their minds and reset their overwhelmed nervous system. Because they possess a deep-seated fear of causing pain or conflict, they choose the path of silence over the risk of an awkward, highly emotional confrontation. Unfortunately, this protective silence almost always breeds far more anxiety than a simple, honest conversation ever would. For those who love them, learning to respect this quiet retreat without taking it as a personal insult is the greatest gift you can offer. It is a silent agreement of trust, knowing that when they have finished putting the pieces of their soul back together, they will return with a renewed and profound capacity to love. The fourth way they unintentionally cause frustration is by holding themselves and everyone around them to impossibly high, almost crushing standards. They are never merely looking for basic kindness or superficial honesty. They are eternally searching for breathtaking emotional depth, undeniable spiritual connection, strictly shared moral values, and flawlessly thoughtful communication. While this pursuit of the ideal sounds incredibly romantic and noble, surviving under the weight of such expectations can be profoundly exhausting. The reason this drives people crazy is that the test is completely invisible. You do not realize you are being measured until you have already failed. When someone falls short of their deeply held values, they will rarely raise their voice or cause a scene. They will simply smile, nod politely, and quietly update their internal ledger. They possess an almost terrifying ability to notice when a person's words do not align with their daily actions. They silently observe when someone chooses the easy lie over the difficult truth, or when a loved one refuses to pursue personal growth. Over years and months, the painful gap between the beautiful potential they see in you and the reality of your actions becomes a chasm they can no longer cross. The brutal reality of this dynamic is that they will often begin to mourn the end of the relationship long before the other person even realizes there is a problem. The genesis of these towering standards comes from a place of profound purity. They intimately know the miraculous beauty of being truly seen and flawlessly understood. Having tasted the divine nectar of genuine soul connection, they find it physically agonizing to accept the hollow surface-level interactions that most of society easily tolerates. So, when they are met with laziness, emotional dishonesty, or casual cruelty, they do not lash out in fierce anger. Instead, they withdraw out of a deep, sorrowful disappointment. It is vital to understand that they apply these exact same brutal standards to their own lives, creating a crushing internal pressure to be perfect, endlessly responsible, and endlessly giving. When they pour their entire soul into a connection and receive only casual effort in return, it feels deeply unjust. The people in their lives often feel as though they are standing in a courtroom, constantly being judged against an invisible metric of perfection, but they do not demand perfection. What they are desperately seeking is genuine effort, sincere growth, and the courage to be vulnerable. When they witness true sincerity, their capacity for forgiveness is boundless. But when they sense deliberate deceit, their respect evaporates quietly into the night, and once that sacred trust is broken, reconstructing it is a nearly impossible task. The fifth challenge of loving such a beautifully complex soul is their relentless ability to see through social masks and perceive hidden motives. Most human beings walk through their daily lives accepting the polite fictions of society. We smile when we are sad, we say we are fine when we are breaking, and we generally accept these illusions from each other to maintain social harmony. But deeply intuitive people refuse to play this game. They possess an X-ray vision for the human soul. They are constantly looking beneath the polished surface, trying to understand the deep, unspoken pain, the historical harm, the sorrow that drives human behavior. You might try to make a light-hearted joke to deflect from your pain, but their piercing gaze will immediately seek out the sadness hiding behind your laughter. They will gently but firmly ask you about the very things you are desperately trying to avoid. This unwavering refusal to accept polite illusions can make people feel incredibly exposed and vulnerable. It is not that they wish to shame anyone or force a painful confession. It is simply that their empathy does not stop at the surface. They feel the tension radiating from your hidden wounds, and their natural instinct is to bring it into the light so it can be healed. But for a person who is not yet ready to face their own shadow, this intense level of psychological scrutiny can feel incredibly invasive and utterly exhausting. Finally, the sixth profound trait that tests the limits of human patience is their excruciatingly slow process of reacting to emotional situations. In a modern culture addicted to instant gratification, rapid-fire text messages, and immediate emotional reactions, their need for deep contemplation feels completely alien. When faced with a heavy conversation or a sudden conflict, they will not yell, snap back, or immediately defend themselves. Instead, they retreat into absolute silence. Hours, days, or even weeks might pass before they feel adequately prepared to offer a meaningful response. To the outside world, this agonizing delay looks exactly like apathy, avoidance, or calculated passive aggression. But the reality occurring inside their mind is a rigorous, beautiful process of emotional filtration. They are meticulously examining every word that was spoken, analyzing not only how the situation wounded them, but intensely considering how their potential response might wound you. They refuse to weaponize their words. Like the slow, careful fermentation process that creates the most profound and deeply nourishing traditional foods, true emotional wisdom requires time to breathe and mature. They sit in the silence because they respect the relationship entirely too much to destroy it with a careless, impulsive reaction. For those who wait on the other side of this silence, it is a painful exercise in faith. But if you can find the grace to give them the time they need to untangle their complex thoughts, the response they eventually bring back to you will be woven with a depth of love, clarity, and profound understanding that makes the wait entirely worthwhile.